Welcome, everyone, to our webinar on the skills emergency and how community colleges can respond to that skills emergency leveraging technology. So we have a fantastic panel here today. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Dan McFadden, co-founder and managing director at Edalex. And I'll briefly introduce each of our panelists, but then as we have each of them speak at the beginning, I'll ask them to give a little bit more information about themselves and their role. We're incredibly fortunate to have such a range of perspectives and insights from our panel today. I'll introduce them. Chris Breitmeyer, who's the president of the Rural Community Colleges Network. Nicole Tucker, the chief operating officer, the COO at Louisiana State Civil Service. James McKenzie, the manager at Heglar Creek Electric and Heglar Creek Plumbing, and Margo Griffith, my colleague, the principal skills consultant at Edalex. And so the format for today's session will be that each of those four panel members will speak for around 10 minutes, giving their own perspective around the skills emergency and the role that community colleges and technology have to play in this. But we certainly welcome questions in the Q&A session. So if there are questions during the Q&A session at the end, please pose those down at the bottom in the Q&A section. But we certainly welcome everyone to participate in the chat as we go. So a number of you have introduced yourselves. We have quite a few participants, so feel free to continue having that chat going throughout. So without further ado, let me give you some context around the skills emergency. As you can see on the screen there, 81% of companies are now engaging with skills-based hiring, which is fantastic. And the implications there are that we're starting to move beyond that. Well, why should we be doing skills-based hiring to how? So we'll get to hear from Nicole and James in particular, giving some flavors on that. And yet, we commissioned some market research that identified that only a third of American college graduates feel comfortable voicing their own skills during their first job search. So we have this massive disconnect. At the same time, that research has identified that 59% of employers are going to need reskilling in the next 5 years. So a massive imperative to retrain, reskill, and upskill our employees. And then looming and certainly having a positive and negative impact even today is the forecast that 90% of roles, most of us here, most of attending, family, friends, and the rest of the world the roles will be disrupted by AI. And Cognizant and Oxford Economics specifically use that word. So there'll be some positive disruptions, but certainly negative disruptions as well. So in this context, so many changing factors, and that's where we really want to emphasize where community colleges, the critical roles that they can play in supporting that. And I was at a conference recently where someone flagged that there's no other entity or organization that impacts a community, individuals, industry, like the community college, and with such a deep impact in the community, and that impact is heightened in the rural setting. So we thought we'd really kick off with Chris Breitmeyer giving us his perspectives, and if we can go to the next slide. As the president of the Rural Community College Network. So Chris, we'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Dan. I think you really said a lot there. But before I get started, I'll give you a little bit more context of who I am and what I do now. I've been in community colleges my entire career. I started off as a faculty member teaching biology and science to students at Yavapai College in Arizona. I then sort of matriculated by accident, actually shanghaied into becoming an administrator. I was Dean of Math, Science, and Health for a while. Then I was a vice president of academic and student affairs. And then the last 7 years, I've been president at Clatsop Community College, a rural college in Oregon on the Oregon coast. Just recently, I stepped into my role as president of RCCA, the Rural Community College Alliance. And as Dan was saying, the thing that I found throughout my career, and that I think all of us here are acutely aware of, is the importance of a community college in its community. I mean, it's right there in the name, right? I think it's even more important in smaller rural areas where you can be not only the center of education, but also an economic driver as well as a cultural driver as well. And what we're seeing with this switch to switch is maybe a bad way, but the evolution of skills-based learning is or skills-based hiring is reflected in what we're doing in the classroom as well. And I think what we're not doing a good job of at community colleges yet, and I think you will hear today from Edalex a little bit more about how they're able to help with that, is to be able to translate what we're doing in the classroom to skills that employers are looking for. I think in some schools we're doing that on a case-by-case basis, but I think to make it part of our DNA is going to require a switch. But there are definitely some challenges to be able to do that, because many community colleges operate on student information systems that don't support that kind of credentialing, and so to be able to pivot and produce a transcript that indicates, that helps students, and we heard earlier that students aren't comfortable with expressing what their skills are, that helps students demonstrate, hey, these are the skills I have, and here are some examples of how I learned them and where I learned them. So that's one thing that we're challenged with. And also, whenever we start to talk about doing a new way of business, I know this is from the faculty perspective and from the administrator perspective, people do not like change, regardless of where they are. And at community college, we have the ability to change, but often it's more difficult than just saying those words, for sure. And so to get faculty and staff on board and to change, and at a rural college, sometimes the challenge is real because of the capacity. We're wearing many hats, and there's not enough time to learn a new way of doing things, or to redesign the curriculum. I think what we're going to see with Edalex is that you don't necessarily have to do that. What you're able to do is take your existing framework and then make a transition. Now, it's not going to be there. It's not a wave of magic wand and that happens, right? Anytime you implement a new system, there's going to be some work involved, but it may not be the heavy lift that some folks are concerned about. Another challenge that all schools have, but is particularly acute at rural and smaller schools, is the funding and resource constraints that we have. Tight budgets make it hard to invest in these new tech tools, or hire someone specialized if it's needed. And the other thing, I think what happens a lot of times is we may get someone who's a leader who says, yes, let's implement this, and we'll do it on a pilot basis, and then it's almost death by pilot. It works, and a pilot works for this small amount of students that we have, but what we need to do is make sure that as we're looking to switch and adapt to this new skills-based hiring and skills-based demonstration for students and for the colleges, is that we do it on a campus-wide basis. It's great that we help those small populations in a pilot, but what we really need to do is make sure that we implement that at scale. And sometimes that's a little bit, again, easier said than done. We also have to continue to stay current, and this is where I think rural community colleges have a leg up maybe on some of the larger colleges, that we have to stay current with our employer expectations. But I know in my role as president, even back when I was a faculty, I was able to interface with folks who were hiring our students and having real conversations about what they needed. So those advisory boards are there for a reason, and we should definitely take advantage of the expertise of the folks in our community who are hiring our students to help us design the curriculum. We cannot be so precious to say, I'm an academic, I know best. And believe me, when I was a faculty member, I did know best. As a president, I still knew best. But some of my best ideas really came from that collaboration. And I think we've got to embrace that. So, it may not always be easy to translate those academic learning outcomes into industry standards, but if we have that conversation, I think that we're able to do that. And then I think that the challenge that academics in general face, community colleges, is that those soft skills and that non-credit kind of learning, that's really important. And it's what a lot of employers are looking for. Obviously, they want competencies in certain areas, but the fact that our holistic education at a community college does bring into play a lot of other things that are just not facts and figures. And so to help quantify that, I think there is going to be important. And so right now, when we're doing our work for like accreditation to assess what our students are learning, we might not be capturing that. So that's something that we may want to look at and actually may want to work into a strategic plan and also get the buy-in of the accrediting agencies as well. And I think we're starting to see that already starting to happen, but I think that's going to be important as well to recognize the fact that it may be that traditional model does need to shift and is shifting, and we want to be recognized for the work that we're doing towards that. And just a couple more things, and then I'll turn it back over to folks. But the other thing is our student population, particularly in rural schools, is very often not haven't had prior success in their family with higher education, and they may not be as confident in whether that's understanding the value of their credentials that they're getting, or they may not know how to leverage the learning that they got into a career pathway. It's our job to help them. It's our job to make that very easy, right? And I think rural schools in particular are doing a much better job in doing that, because we can, with our smaller size, really build those relationships with students. And I think when you have a new program like this opportunity, you are going to really want to sort of push that out to students as well. Not only do you have to do sort of an internal PR campaign with your staff and faculty as you're looking to change, you're also going to need to let the students know, here's what we're doing for you, right? This is another service we're providing for you, and this is how it's going to be helpful for you. All the while, we have to keep in mind about not all students have access to the kind of technology that's going to help them leverage this information. So we've got to make it accessible to them in whatever way that we can. We don't want to widen any of the equity gaps that already exist. We want to shrink those gaps. And I think that rural schools, community colleges in general have a big chore, as we all know, but we wouldn't be doing this work if we didn't think it made a difference, and if we didn't think that we could help our communities and our students. So I'm excited to hear what other folks have to say about this, and I'm really pleased that you all invited me to be part of this group today. So Dan, that's it for me. I don't know if hopefully I didn't talk too long.
No, that was perfect, Chris, and you touched on a number of really interesting topics that I'm sure we'll circle back to in the Q&A around pilots, and we're starting to get a bit of a dialogue there. Just a quick note when you are replying, just make sure that reply is going to everyone, so everyone can see that. But also the challenges, but especially the opportunities and responsibilities that our community colleges, especially in the rural setting, but I think more broadly, community colleges can have, and the imperative, and especially for those first in family and those who are really charting a new path for themselves and their family. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Chris. Now, Nicole, we'll shift our focus to you, and would love to hear from you, your perspective and sharing a bit about Louisiana and the shift that the civil service has made to skills-based hiring, and would love to hear about the journey, the drivers, how you've done it, and your models. It's really fascinating hearing about it in our earlier discussion. So thank you again for sharing with our entire audience here.
Yes, thank y'all. Thank y'all for the opportunity for us as a state, Louisiana, to kind of have this perspective and showcase kind of what we are doing and where we are on our journey. As Dan said earlier, my name is Nicole Tucker. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Louisiana State Civil Service. As part of that role, I oversee the Talent Acquisition and Workforce Development Division, which they are responsible for that talent acquisition, the hiring, recruitment. We kind of work here in the state of Louisiana as far as what we at State Civil Service do. Our Talent Acquisition and Workforce Development Division, they are responsible for our state agencies whenever they need to post a position, post a job. We here at State Civil Service kind of work with them on those job postings. We then vet those applicants to make sure that they qualify with the minimum qualifications. And then from there, we kind of put them on an eligible list, and then we release that eligible list to the state agency. So we kind of work in a centralized, decentralized kind of hybrid when it comes to recruitment for state agencies here in the state of Louisiana. And that's really important as I kind of progress into how we operate here in Louisiana and where we were and kind of where we are now. So for us during COVID, just like a lot of state government and public entities kind of dealt with, that applicant pool really was demolished. We had lower applicants than we've ever seen before. So as part of that, we were really starting to hear from state agencies, and we really were trying to consult with them and help them out. And we were hearing a lot of, there are some barriers, like the few applicants we are getting, there are some barriers. And one of those were the pre-employment exams. We had pre-employment exams for a number of jobs here in the state of Louisiana. Specifically what we called as the PLE, which is the professional level exam, and then the OSC, which is this office support exam. We were hearing a lot and seeing a lot just in the data that people were struggling, passing those exams. And those exams, although they were validated, years ago, we were running into issues where is it really a true depiction of if someone can do the job? Can they do what you're wanting them to do in those positions? So that kind of started us here during the pandemic, and with those conversations of, well, we don't want to remove the pre-employment exams, and we don't have anything else to give those hiring managers to use to help them. So that's where we kind of work together, and we here in the state of Louisiana have our competency model that has over 50 competencies in it. And we were using that mainly in our talent development and for training. When agencies, came and said, hey, we need more training in this area. Our training and our curriculum, our courses were built on that competency model. So we were using it more in the talent development and not really the recruitment. And we took that as an opportunity to build what we call the SCS Hiring Framework, which is a suite of competency-based resources specifically for hiring. It is a 6-step process. We actually only require the first 3. And the reason that we decided to require just the first 3 steps, and I'll kind of go into a little detail on what those steps are. The first step really is developing a competency map. So during our research and before we launched the hiring framework, I saw in the chat we were talking about pilot. We actually piloted our hiring framework here at our agency before we rolled it out statewide. So there are definitely benefits to doing a pilot because we were able to iron out a few things before we launched it statewide. But we actually develop a competency map. And what that does is you're looking at the core competencies and deciding what those preferred competencies, if you have any, before you actually post the job, right? So we kind of tell agencies, look through the position description. As part of our exercise when we piloted here with our hiring managers, we actually found that there was a lot of things in the position description, in the job description, that was not necessary. It was not actually what they were requiring or wanting those positions to do. So it really allowed you to kind of do some cleanup and a true reflection of what is it that we're looking for. And from there, we require agencies, and we did this as well, to put specifically what you need this job to do in the posting. We are hearing a lot in state government, post and pray, you just post a position, you copy paste. A lot of times, a lot of people don't ever read it, right? So something you posted 5 years ago is still getting posted now. That's not what the position's doing. So it's kind of, requiring agencies to actually take a step and post what you're needing and wanting these positions to do so that applicants have a true reflection of what it is that job they'll be doing on day one. We were hearing a lot of feedback also that applicants would start the job and they're like, well, that's not what I thought this was. So that's why we kind of built that into that 6-step process. And again, a lot of this sounds very elementary, like, well, you should know how to do this. It's a lot of things that people just were not doing. Just like Chris mentioned, it's hard to kind of break what you've always been doing and that comfort, and you get stuck in that. So this hiring framework really took an opportunity for us to look at that. Third step is then selecting supplemental questions. We actually put supplemental questions on the job posting that is specifically linked to the competency. So if the competency that the agency is selecting, that I need someone with demonstrating accountability, we actually have a supplemental question that essentially is asking the applicant to rate themselves and then to show us or to tell the hiring manager how or why did you rate yourself this way, right? So that's their first opportunity to really showcase those skills and talk about how you exhibit that competency. So that, behind the scenes is really the first assessment for the hiring manager to look at those applicants. Whereas before you have the pre-employment exam, pass, fail, and then we did have the scores on that. So we're trying to communicate to hiring managers, that's your first assessment essentially for those applicants, is to look at those supplemental questions. And then from there we have interview questions that again are specifically linked to the competency. So everything is based on that competency. So when we say that the hiring framework is a suite of competency-based resources, that's what we're meaning. Everything is linked back to that competency. I see in the chat that they shared that for us as well, for anyone that would like to see that. And then we have interview activities, specific activities that, again, link to the competency and link to what you need that position to do. So it's allowing those applicants to showcase that, whereas right now or before, they really didn't have the opportunity. And again, you would assume that hiring managers were doing this, and a lot of them weren't. They were just looking through applications, and then selecting someone, and then that someone probably didn't last a couple months, and we were reposting it over and over, and it starts that vicious cycle. So that's kind of where our mind was, and that's how the hiring framework really operates. So we launched that January of 2024. So at the same time, we removed those pre-employment exams, and then we launched the hiring framework, and we require agencies to do the first 3 steps. And of course, we highly encourage them to do all of the steps. But as you all know, change is hard. So that's why at least they have done the first 3 steps. And it also kind of helped because it gave HR and hiring managers that first year really to just know what a competency is and what we're doing. And now we're kind of moving into that phase 2 of like why we're doing it. Why is it so important to look at the competencies and use the skills whenever you're hiring, and then even more so onboarding those employees. And I know that was a lot. But the other thing I think that you all kind of wanted us to touch on is how has it been, right? How are the hiring managers kind of adapting to this? And I think that's a big key to touch on, because as we're in this second year essentially of the hiring framework, that's where we are seeing and learning a lot that hiring managers are struggling. So Chris, you talked about, being able to speak and talk about those skills. It's the same thing for hiring managers, because we're not taught that, or we weren't taught that. It's hard to identify and see these skills, because for so long we're used to what have you done, maybe not how or what skills you use or what are those transferable skills. It's specifically what you've done. So in return, hiring managers are only looking for, did Dan do this before? Okay, he's never done this, I'm moving on, versus looking at it more so from, can Dan do this on the job, right? Can his skills allow him to be able to do this specific task? So that's kind of the phase that we're in now. We do have hiring manager and HR training specific to the hiring framework and the importance of it, and being able to see that through the supplemental question responses, as well as being able to identify those skills specifically in the applications. So that's kind of the training that we are working on now, and we've actually started that. But because the training's not mandatory yet, it's just optional, we aren't getting as much buy-in as we want. But the issue right now is kind of getting that down to the hiring managers. Our focus, we realize, has been more on HR.
Fantastic, Nicole. And I loved hearing about that journey, and I'm sure we'll have more questions during the Q&A, like where do I start? And
Yeah.
so actually the fact that Janelle has posted the Louisiana hiring framework is great. So everyone can have a look at that, and recognizing it is a journey. And Chris, you flagged that, making sure that someone commits to something, but there is that feedback and learning loop as you've described, Nicole. Now, one thing I would suggest that we shy away from is can Dan do this job? I think Margo, as my colleague, will say, no, Dan can't. He doesn't have these skills. So poor example, but otherwise really, really fantastic. And I'm sure we'll dive into it more. So thank you for your perspective. Now I'd love to switch across to James and let's hear your perspective, James, as an adult learner, but then also as a manager at a small business, and being able to share with us both of those perspectives, and would love to hear what drove you to go back for further education, and what skills were you looking, or what drove you to that, but then also from a hiring perspective, and comparing and contrasting with Nicole, would love to get your perspective on hiring and what you look for.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. As with everyone else, I'm happy to be here today. Glad that I got extended the invitation. Love to be on this panel. It kind of brings me to a comment my dad made one time, and he said, sometimes, James, it's better to keep your mouth shut and be thought a fool than to open it and remove all doubt. And Nicole hammered on competency, and I feel by the end of this meeting, everyone's going to realize who the least competent person is on this panel. But no, I'm extremely happy to be here today. Super happy to join this panel and this discussion. Just quick background, James McKenzie, right here from the Paul, Idaho area, that's out west. I grew up here, stayed here. I kind of had the opportunity of landing. My first job was helping my best buddy's dad out in high school. He's an electrician, and it kind of just piqued my curiosity a little bit. There, while I was a senior, it was a lot of fun. You got to hang out with your best friend, and I ended up going off to college and kind of looked at going into some other careers, and just always, for whatever reason, I felt like I kept getting pulled back to a trade type profession. And so I decided after a couple of years of college that at a junior college that it just probably wasn't the thing for me. And I could kind of feel a strong draw to want to go into some type of a trade. And went back to my hometown, Rupert, Paul area, and went to work for an electrician. And it was great. I was able to start with the local college here, community college of Southern Idaho, go Golden Eagles. And it was great for me because the thing that I love about going to trade schools is it gives we as workers, the opportunity to work all day, and then you can go to school at night for 3 or 4 hours, 2 nights a week. And so it made it possible for a guy that had just been married, didn't have much going for him. My wife was the best thing I had going for me. And it created an opportunity where I could work. I could afford college. It was very inexpensive to go into trade school as far as money-wise went. And it kind of launched me into a career. And I'll never forget the first place I went, as a manager, where I'm at now. I have a ton of 18-year-olds that come in here, just fresh out of high school. And I had the luxury of graduating high school. I went on a mission for a couple of years, and then I went to a 2-year college. So I was a little more mature, but some of the talking points I'd like to talk about is some of these younger adults that come in to the office space, and myself, it's given me the opportunity to reflect on me. And I feel fortunate because I grew up in a slightly different generation where we had to learn some of those durable skills like communicating, looking people in the eye, shaking hands, something so simple as a person and an individual coming into your office and looking you in the eye and shaking your hand and introducing themselves. And, my dad taught me that trait and that lesson, that it was very important. And I can see in life, like, you can learn so much about an individual just by shaking their hand and looking them in their eye. And a lot of times they won't even look you in the eye, right? And I know that probably sounds super ridiculous for people in different, with different backgrounds and in different demographics and different areas. But I feel like a lot of those durable skills that I was fortunate enough to have been raised with have kind of been gone, or they've gone by the wayside. But back to my story, I went to work for this small company doing electrical work. They paid for my schooling, so it was great as long as I, passed my courses. And I just kind of continued down the electrical trade. I did primarily ag. Obviously, we're in Idaho. There's a lot of potatoes out here, a lot of sugar beets, a lot of grain. And it was just super great, super passionate. And I did that for about 15 years and worked myself into a position where I was doing electrical trade work, wiring a bunch of pump panels, a bunch of pivots, ag shops, sellers, and worked into a sales position while I was at that specific company, and did that for 3 or 4 years. And at a certain point, I had the place where I'm working now, Heglar Creek Electric. One of the owners approached me and said, "Hey, listen, we're kind of struggling here. We're looking for someone to come and help manage this company. Would you be interested?" And I was really overwhelmed at first because I knew how to sell pivots. I knew how to wire pivots, but I didn't have maybe some of the skills that I thought were going to be necessary to manage a larger electrical company. But I could also see that maybe it had potential for me to do something that might not come around every day to a person. So I did. I took the jump, came over here, started managing the electrical division. And when I first started, I think we had 18 employees. And I've had the opportunity to be able to hire, well over 100 employees at this point.
Wow.
And so I've been able to see so many different types of people come in the front, come in the office and apply for a job. And just talking to some of Nicole's points that she made, like I can see, competency. There's so many things that I think they're not taught what to do in an interview. Not that they don't want to, but they don't know how to articulate themselves. And you have to, as a hirer or a hiring person, you have to dig some of those things out, where if we could educate kids more, or anyone more, not just kids, but if we could educate individuals more, they could articulate themselves and could express what they're good at rather than have to dig for some of those things. And I think that would do volumes for these individuals. But yeah, so I came to work at Heglar Creek Electric back in 2019. Had a great time here. It's been fantastic. We were able to partner up with CSI. We hire a lot of the kids that go through their program. Obviously, 100% of our apprentices have to go through that community college program, and it's a fantastic program. I would say it's the lifeblood of the Magic Valley, and it's a lifeblood because, as I can't remember, I think maybe it was me. Oh, it was you, Dan, I believe, that mentioned that AI would replace most of jobs by 2038 or something.
Yeah, 2034. Yeah.
34. Okay,
Disrupt. Yes. Yeah.
Thank goodness, trades aren't some of those jobs that AI is going to replace. We got to have people that can drill holes to pull wire and run conduit and do all these things. And so it's just been overwhelming, I think, at times, because we've had to hire so many people, and we've had to really lean on CSI to help establish some of the framework and the foundation of our company, to teach them, and to educate them. And to going back to some of the points that Dan made earlier, I really wish that junior colleges and some of these programs could focus more on those durable skills and maybe somehow adapt those or pull those into the curriculum for teaching, the electrical apprenticeship programs or the fabrication programs or the HVAC or the plumbing, because they're critical skills that they need to be successful in their careers. To be able to talk to customers is critical. To be able to talk to your boss. There's just so many things that they need to have more competency. They need to have more skills as far as what they're trying to say, what they need, what they don't understand. I feel like they can really, really relate to cell phones and articulate themselves really well to their cell phones and their Snapchats and their Instagram accounts. But when it comes face to face, where it's really critically important in the works field, it's really hard for them to do that. And so I really love what we're trying to accomplish here, and what our end goal is as an employer. That's a huge thing for us. And so I can also say that as an employer, it's been great to be able to work with some of these places, to be able to work with CSI and to grow a business. I look at the world moving forward, going back to, Nicole and some of the points she made. We're having a huge gap. We just did a deal with the state of Idaho where by 2032, we're going to be short 500,000 plumbers in the United States.
Wow.
Like 500,000. That's I believe that the plumbing trade will be one of the most profitable trades, probably the most profitable trade, just because there's such a shortage in the workforce there. And I think that I can't remember the exact numbers, but even journeyman electricians, every year there's like 2 or 3 retiring and 1 coming on board. And so with these numbers, we have to figure out ways to attract more people to the trade. You know, Dan made that one of his bullet points was 59% of people are going to be reskilling. You know, lately we've had like teachers come in here that aren't happy with the education system, and they feel that, listen, there's a great chance that AI might replace me someday. And so they're reskilling, you know, not even reskilling, I wouldn't say, like completely recareering. And it's not just teachers. There's several other industries that we're starting to see a huge influx of these people coming in. And we're seeing a huge influx of, I would say, a lot of incompetence. And the only reason I use that incompetence is because they've never been taught competence. And so it would make, as a manager, it would make my life a lot easier and our company's life a lot easier if they had some of those skills. And I believe they're simple skills to be taught. But back in the day, you know, I look across this panel, I think most of us probably had those things. We took it for granted, a lot of things that we were taught just by nature, just because it was a societal norm to teach those things, where now it's a societal norm not to teach those things. And so I really feel that someone or some organization needs to come up with a program and curriculum to try and help us get out of the issue that we're in, because we can't teach them fast enough. As soon as they come, you know, they come in, my office door's right here to the right. They come in that door, apply for a job. 90% of the time we're going to hire them because we need them, because there's a shortage. And we send them out, and you just never catch up to the competency scale. You're always behind, because the person they're out there with is barely competent, and the person above him slightly more competent than him, and so or qualified, whatever you want to say. And so it's a curve that you can never get to the front side of. And I believe that we have to start that curve at the beginning, not when they walk in the door of this office. And I think that's completely possible. In fact, I'm going to show you something. This is what incompetence does. Can you guys see this right here? This is my old Dodge steering wheel. And so I drive down the road doing this because I deal with so many issues every day, so much stress from incompetence and problems. I keep this as a trophy. But I say that jokingly, but it's a serious problem that I feel there's simple solutions to mitigate that problem. I really feel that way. But yeah, so just clicking forward. So then I had the opportunity to help out in the plumbing division. We have Heglar Creek Plumbing, and I just across the boards, folks, there's a shortage of people that know how to work, that want to work, that have ever been taught that they need to work. And as I say, there's several that have been, and they're fantastic. When those people walk in the door, I know who they are. The second I shake their hand, I'm like, we're hiring this guy. Like, just go fill out your new paperwork. You don't even need to talk to me. But I've had the opportunity to be around a lot of people and a lot of the younger generation. I think that there's so much opportunity and so much potential there. And I feel that there's so much change that's happening there so fast with the groups of people that and bear in mind, I'm speaking specifically to a type of person and a specific group of people. This encompasses a lot, your group. But I feel so much optimism towards this group of kids and this younger generation, because somebody has to. Like, we got what we got to work with. Somebody needs to mentor these individuals. Somebody needs to put some passion in them and some drive in them. And so I take my job very serious. I'm super grateful that I get to have this opportunity to help make a small change here in the Magic Valley. Super grateful for CSI and for the partnership that we have with them and the support that we get from them, and for the products that they can turn out. Like CSI, a college can only do so much when you're trying to teach a trade, right? They go through the code book, they go through skills. I would love to incorporate some type of a class that would help them when they walk in this door, to Nicole's point, to be able to articulate themselves and tell me what they're good at and why they're good at it. And I think that if we could do that, and to where they know why they're good at it, that would do volumes as far as me as an employer and as a manager hiring people. And I guess that's really all I have right now. I'd love to answer questions later if there's any.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. Fantastic perspective. I think so much in parallel with Nicole's, what you shared, Nicole, but then also your own personal perspective and get from that small to medium employer, and yeah, there's been a bit in the chat as well around skills and willingness to work. So hopefully we'll have time to come back in the Q&A. And so we'll have Margo, Griffith, our final panelists, talk, and I think, Margo, you'll be able to touch on a few of those themes around recognizing skills and durable skills and technical skills and other skills. So over to you.
Well, just wow. Yeah, you could probably see me nodding frantically as all of you were talking, because yeah, everything you were saying was resonating. The thing that did strike me too was, James, as you were talking, how would you represent your journey? Like, how do you tell your story? You tell your story beautifully verbally, but if you were to have to tell that story, which is quite diverse, how would you be able to do that? And I think that's part of what I want to talk about today. So before I get on to that, though, let me introduce who I am. So I'm the Principal Skills Consultant for Edalex. And we are a company that is hyper-focused on skills. Some do call us skills nerds. I personally identify as a skills nerd. And I think that's an important thing to do, right? My background has been, I started off life as a speech-language pathologist. I moved from there into educational publishing, and I stayed in that for most of my career, the latter half on the digital transformation side of things, from print to digital. So having, been in that transformation, very big transformation that we went through for decades, and have stayed, as you can clearly see, in the technology side of things. Chris, as my beautiful assistant, I think that you are controlling slides, so I'll try and keep up. I do have slides. I move through them pretty quickly, so it won't be death by PowerPoint, I promise you. One of the things that I do want to focus on today is this notion around recognition. So I'm on a personal mission to change teaching and learning into teaching, learning, and recognition, because I think part of this problem, not the whole problem, part of the problem, is that we are not recognizing what we value. I think personally, and to your point, James, that we do teach some of those skills. We just don't make it overt. We're just not making that clear. And so teaching, learning, and recognition, I think, for me, it's important that we start thinking of those three things together, and not just recognizing what we value, but recognizing what we value at the point where it will have impact for those learners. And so at the moment, we're holding hostage that learning right to the end, where we give them a certificate, or we give them a diploma, or we give them a degree. Why do we hold that learning hostage for all those years? Why are we not recognizing as we go along? Because particularly adult learners could use the recognition of those skills to get a job or get a better job. So if you take nothing else away from this particular webinar, teaching, learning, and recognition. Thanks, Chris. I think James put it beautifully, and Nicole also reiterated this point too, that we having trouble finding people with the right skills at the moment. But I'm not going to be another person that sits here and says we've got a skills gap. We all know that. And there's a bunch of factors as to why that's happening, big ones, small ones. But there is that disconnect, as Dan said, in this learn to earn system, right? We've got this disconnect. Some of those factors are out of our control. But I think one of the ones that is in our control, and particularly your control as community colleges, is this notion of signal strength. Are we giving learners the appropriate signals to tell their story of what they know and can do, right? And I suspect we are not. And we could probably all agree that transcripts and grades and certificates are terrible signals of what you know and can do, right? The completion of a course there's not enough granularity around what I can do at a task level. And so I think that needs to change. And that's one of the things that we do have in our control. Thanks, Chris. So I talk a lot around skills visibility, because I do think it comes down to that. Skills visibility, we know it unlocks human potential, right? Once we can see everyone's skills, and I'm talking from an individual learner perspective, because at Edalex, that's what we designed for. But it's also true in an institutional or an organizational level, right? Once you've got that visibility, then you can do something about it, right? Once you know better, you can do better. So we do need to be able to empower learners with the tools and the confidence to tell their story of what they know and can do. We do need to enable those better signals. By doing that, we can do this recognize as you go and credential as you go. And I do believe that if we start doing that, our retention and our employment outcomes will be better. And reiterating both Nicole and James, we have to have more intentionality around those durable skills. I think they're being taught. I think that they are part of your learning experience when you are at college. You can't tell me that you're doing a lab or a group project or presenting and you're not actually getting some skills. What we're not doing is recognizing those. And I have to say, I think this is an economic imperative. We've just got to do this. We've got to do better. Chris? Thank you. So when we're talking with our partners at Edalex, these are the kind of questions that we are sort of going through and asking. So the first one is, do you have a common skills language? Does everyone understand what you're talking about when you say this skill? Do you know the context of what that skill means? You know, when we talk about communication, it's very different in a health situation than it is in an engineering situation. One needs an overlay of empathy. One needs an overlay of clarity and conciseness, right? So context is really important. Are your learning outcomes expressed as skills? Because some learning outcomes are just learning outcomes, but some of them are actually skills, and we need to be more overt than saying, yeah, this skill right here. Are the skills that are being assessed across multiple courses? And I suspect with durable skills, yes, they are. It's not a linear thing. You know, don't just have collaboration and there it is, right? These things are skills that are built across multiple points of their learning, across multiple courses, across multiple areas. And so we need to be able to unlock that and recognize it. Are you assessing a level of mastery? Is there a proficiency scale that you're going on, or is it just binary? You're competent, not competent? Doesn't matter. It's just, have you thought around how you're measuring that? And are you referencing a framework or a taxonomy or an industry standard? And do your learners know that? Like, is this being made, overt? Do you know what jobs link to those skills? More importantly, if you're doing all of that, well, bravo, I would be super excited if you were doing all of that. But the important thing here is, how do you make all of that visible for your learners? But more importantly, how do you make that visible for the employers? Thanks, Chris. So here's where we get down to the real stuff. Chris Breitmeyer mentioned scale and sustainability. Super important in all of this, right? You have a current tech stack at your community college, and it's great and it's doing a great job, but I don't know that some of these are set for the jobs that we need them to do. I don't think your LMS is going to be enough. I'm going to tell you why. Chris? LMSs do a wonderful job of what they're designed for, and that is to manage content in courses. What they do a not so great job of is being able to track across those courses. Maybe in learning outcomes, some of the better ones can do that. Do they do that from a skill perspective? Absolutely not. So there has to be some mechanism where we can unlock that assessment data and start to make sense of that for learners. I think some of the systems you have might be making sense for an institution, but I don't think they're making sense for a learner. And we kind of have to make that switch. You're dealing with adult learners. We have to empower them to make decisions around their own learning and where they're going to go next, right? And the way to do that is to give them the information. So I think a lot of institutions are still, we've got the information, we'll tell you how you're going to go. That flip to learner agency is something that does need to happen. Chris? So this is how we solve for it, right? We come in with our platform, Credentialate particularly, and we map all of that data. We say, hey, if we're going to recognize collaboration, it's taught here, 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 and here across all of these courses. We're going to bring it into Credentialate, and we're going to map it into a one-time mapping, which we call an evidence matrix. And you can set the rules, and we can grab the qualitative information, and we have the quantitative information, and we can even go down to the point where we map it out to specific skill definitions to give that context. And we do this at scale. right? We set this once and then it's automated. So there is a little bit of work up front for you in sort of identifying where those skills are being taught. But once that's done, it runs. Chris? What we produce for the learners, this tool that we were talking about, this to build confidence, is this thing called the evidence record. And so once you've decided what you want to recognize, then we bring it all together and we represent it in this visual representation. This is a secure, a verifiable presentation that can be shared and printed. But more importantly, we can pack this for digital portability in the back end of a digital badge, and I'll show you what that looks like. And so in this evidence record, we can grab from your learning management system or other systems, just that typically this information sits in a learning management system. We grab all that quantitative and qualitative information. We have all the rules around awarding, but we can also bring in artifacts as well. So these are the proof points. These are the things that prove that Alexandria can do teamwork. It's not an e-portfolio. We can bring that in, and then we can also make the alignment to any frameworks, particularly industry frameworks. And that's all presented for the learner and the employer when they click on this link. Chris, if you can go to the next one. This is just another presentation. So with Alexandria, we were talking about one skill. You might want to present a whole bunch of skills. So maybe you've got a capstone course. In this case, it's a portrait of a graduate because we're dealing with a K-12. But you might want to present a whole bunch of skills in this verifiable presentation that we have, this evidence record. And that can be done as well. This is entirely up to you. This is configurable. This looks like what you want it to look like. And you can see here that we've broken this out into a skill definition. We have another platform called OpenRSD, which is essentially a place to create and share and store skill level data. So we can pack even more context at that skill level. And it's important for us to do this in a standardized way because we do need all of this data to be read by the machines. We are not going back to an analog world. We're hurtling increasingly into this digital world. So everything that we do at Edalex prepares for an interoperable digital world, and it makes this portable for the learners so they have the control to curate it and share it. Thanks, Chris. As I said before, we can put this into a digital badge, and that's for portability, right? That's so that the learners have this control. Moving forward, we can also share it to things like digital wallets or learning and employment records. All of these things are coming through. So we have the technological tools. This is not a tech issue. They're all there at the moment. This is a cultural change. This is something that really needs to change grassroots and I suspect you're going to be at the forefront of this as community colleges. It needs to change in the way that we recognise what learners know and can do. Thanks, Chris. So we can do a number of things around skills visibility. We can do all of the things that I just said. Take data, present it into an evidence record, put it into a digital badge or a digital wallet. If you are maybe not ready to utilize those badges, because sometimes you're not, like particularly if you're in K-12, right? You don't need all those badges. What you do need, though, is this notion of skills visibility. So we can take that data, we can pull it into Credentialate and run it through all the rules and models, and then we can push it back into your LMS in this form of a learner dashboard so that the learning team always knows where you are in terms of your acquisition of skills and your mastery of skills. I won't get into all of that, but there's different ways of being able to look at this notion of skills visibility. Thanks, Chris. All of that I have just said in a really quick and fast fashion, we've put into a course. So it's a free course. It's up on our website. When we share these slides later, you'll be able to click on that QR code and start it. So we've put it into a place where, you know, if you really are interested in exploring how you can do this more at your community college, we've done this course for you. Thanks, Chris. I won't spend much time on this, but when you think about skills visibility, it's not just one use case, right? With all of our partners, we do a bunch of different things, whether it's complex awarding models of Scouts, whether it's micro-credentialing at scale for a big statewide community college system, whether it's credential as you go, that notion of being able to recognize and credential as you go and not hold, the learning hostage. We do that for a company called Chorus Connect. We recognize durable skills with our partners, Education Design Lab in the US. We do a whole of school recognition for several high schools here. And we do that industry alignment to micro-credentials for a tier 1 university called University of Melbourne. Thanks, Chris. So my point in that slide was the use case is not always the same use case. We are very flexible because you're in control and we're the enablers. We're the plumbers, James. we're the skills data plumbers. And before I stop and leave this, I want to tell you about something new that we're doing. We are employing AI. We are very passionate around being able to recognize an individual's skills from their lived experience. And we're looking at ways that we can do that through the evidence that you provide, not just your formal qualifications, your volunteering, you're looking after mum and dad, all of those experiences that make up you. We're wanting to be able to recognize that. So we have a new platform called Skills Aware, employing AI to be able to do that. I won't go into that right now. I just wanted to make you aware of that. The thing is with Skills Aware, what we've done is we've employed all of the platforms that Edalex has underneath the hood. So I will stop there because I really do want to get to the Q&A. So thank you for that. Over to you, Dan.
Fantastic. Thank you, Margo. Yeah, great to get that context around the ability to recognize those skills. And we've had a number of really interesting questions come through. There have been a few that have been themed around durable skills and recognizing those. So I'll throw that to the panel. I know, Nicole, you answered one online. But yeah, surfacing this durable skills around work ethic, teachability, willingness to learn, and in the community college context, maybe Chris, I'll first throw to you. How do those skills get taught? But then then the flip side is from an employer is how do you recognize those? James, you talked about instantly recognizing in some people, yes, they have these communication skills. They have it. How do we teach it? And then how do we recognize it in an equitable, even-handed fashion? So I'll throw that out to the panel.
Well, I think, James mentioned his experience, and I think for a lot of our CTE, career technical education, it's very evident, right? The skills that you're gaining and that connection with industry is a lot tighter. I think where we need to do a better job is the general education. When I come through with my associate's degree and I'm ready to transfer, I've got to your point, to Margo's point, and the whole point of this is I've got some skills, and so we've got to figure out a way how to quantify those. And I heard James talk a lot about sort of being ready for the job. I think we do a pretty good job in our courses if they're designed well to do that. But where we don't do a good job is letting the students know, hey, you learned more than just how to write a poem. You've learned how to express yourself, how to be part of a team, how to be creative, those kinds of things. So that's where I think we need to be stronger in our gen ed classes.
Yeah. Nicole?
I would agree. I think it was Tara that asked the question. And it's funny, I didn't type the answer since it was directed towards Chris, but I did have, we all have friends in state government, and people fresh out of high school are just trying to find, their next job, and maybe they're not interested in going into college or community college, and they're kind of just like, I don't know how to find a job. I don't know what, I don't really have any experience, or I don't know how to articulate what I've done. And, I always say, well, just use the resources that you have, right? Like, we're not all great at identifying the skills also. Someone in a cohort that we're a part of here in the state of Louisiana said identifying skills is a skill itself, right? It's very hard to articulate that. It really is a skill to be able to say, like, instead of I learned how to do a poem, how I actually did XYZ that helped me learn how to, or helped me create this poem, right? Those are the skills that I use. But really, for me, the advice I gave this young lady was to just use, Chat GPT, or just use, the AI that you have currently. And you can simply say, I've done XYZ. What are some skills trends in this, right? It will give you something. And I think people have to start doing that, or using that as a resource to help them. Because I think when people see it, then they're like, oh, yes, I have done that. You're right. I do know how to communicate. People are just not taught how to communicate like that, or articulate their skills. So because there is this gap right now, I'm trying to figure out how to teach people how to do it. You can use some resources. So I thought it was interesting, Margo, that you talked about the skills aware, because that kind of is what I'm talking about. It allows the tool really to do exactly what I said, because I think a lot of people are struggling with how to shift their mindset into being able to see the skills and what they've already done. All they see is exactly what they've done, that task, but not the how.
100%. Skills literacy is probably the biggest issue we have, and that has to start young. We've got to start way earlier. Yeah.
Yep, we definitely see that. Well, we have so many more, and we've really tapped into fantastic discussion. So maybe, we'll stick around for one more minute. But yeah, I would love to, well, first to thank Chris, Nicole, James, and Margo for your contributions and perspectives. I love the concrete takeaway that people can refer, Nicole, to the Louisiana competency and hiring models, the insights that we've received from each of our panelists. I would love to stick around to further this discussion. I know from Edalex's perspective, we're looking to host a series of these webinars, so I think we'll be able to pull on some of these threads a little bit further in future discussions. But I've loved how so many different perspectives, but then ultimately, and even the feedback from attendees has been around, these skills. We need these skills. It is an emergency for individuals, for communities, for the country. So really appreciate everyone's thoughts and perspectives, and thank you again to our panelists.